The FTC is looking into allegations that Microsoft is shoving AI down the throats of its customers. They may be in trouble. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Dave Linthicum is Not AI. I'm Dave, an AI SME and an AI skeptic, looking at AI with a balanced perspective. Let's get started. So according to the news, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, has recently intensified its investigation into Microsoft behavior regarding its business software, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence practices, with focus on the company's integration of AI features like Copilot into its core product suite. So this heightened scrutiny follows reports and concerns that Microsoft may be leveraging its dominance in Windows and Office by bundling AI, security, and identity tools, potentially limiting customers' choice and stiffening competition in the rapidly evolving cloud and AI sectors. The ongoing inquiry is gathering evidence from industry competitors to determine whether Microsoft practice hinders fair market dynamics. And as I quote from an article in Yahoo Finance, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that in the description, the agency is looking for evidence that Microsoft makes it difficult for customers to use Windows, Office, and other products on competing cloud services. Additionally, the FTC is seeking information about Microsoft's bundling and artificial intelligence, security, and identity software with other products like Windows and Office. So here we go. You guys have been complaining about the fact, and I have as well, that Microsoft is kind of shoving AI at us and shoving, all these new capabilities. And, obviously we're paying for those and we didn't ask for them. Most of us didn't ask for them. We don't find them useful. And the bloat and the excess of software functions that are coming into their products that really don't need it is causing many to question whether Microsoft is doing something wrong or not. And so many people have declared shenanigans around how Microsoft has been competing in the marketplace. And the fact of the matter is many of us are dependent on operating systems and productivity products that Microsoft builds. And when they put software in there that we can't avoid using, it's a little disconcerting in the fact that they're going to be making more money from that. They're going to be using our resources to run those things. And ultimately, people are asking the question, is this fair? Is this something that should be looked at? And evidently, the government agrees because they're taking a look at it. So investigative demand subpoenas, that's what those are, have been sent to at least 6 of Microsoft's competitors in these markets. And so what's going on is the FTC is starting an investigation and to see if there's something there, if actually Microsoft is doing something that's anti-competitive, that's something that they're going to have to talk about, in essence, violating some of the statutes that we have here in the United States. And understand, I'm not a lawyer and I don't work for the FTC, so I don't have a legal opinion as to whether or not they're violating something or not. But I can tell you what I understand. I can understand that Microsoft has made some very aggressive moves in pushing AI, Copilot, specifically into their productivity tools and operating systems, and typically with no rhyme or reason. And obviously reporting that as revenue and basically pushing AI down to every aspect of the technology that we use from them when most people didn't ask for it. It's additional complications. It's something that is making their computers run slower. They're concerned about security. And I think enough people have complained that the government's looking into it. So central to the investigation is whether Microsoft restricts customers from using its core products on rival cloud services. That's going to be part of it. So in other words, if the company owns the ecosystem, and there's companies out there that do, not just Microsoft, by the way, Apple owns an ecosystem, Microsoft, of course, owns an ecosystem, and you could even argue that AWS owns an ecosystem, with AWS, having a largest share of infrastructure as a service, cloud services out there. And therefore, they're kind of put into a position when they can do things that are going to be anti-competitive. In other words, if they're promoting their own stuff and competing software runs on those platforms, in those ecosystems, are they taking steps to make sure that you're going to pick their stuff over the competing product stuff? And I think that's what the FTC is looking at, as well as the AI thing. And we'll get into that in a minute. So I think the big thing is FTC is examining Microsoft's strategy of bundling AI security and identity features with products like Windows and Office. And we've talked about this here on the channel a ton. I'll go ahead and post the video up there that I just did on that. So it's AI features that few people have asked for. And Microsoft is getting a huge amount of pushback on that. And so they're just bundling the features that they think you should be using when no one is in essence asking for it. And you may be saying, well, what's wrong with that? I just have a feature, I don't use it. Well, it is, in case of Windows 11, requiring you in many cases to upgrade your hardware to do lots of things. But, obviously running AI inference and AI systems on your own hardware, basically as the front end of these things, could be what's requiring the hardware upgrades. And if that's the case, people are spending more money to upgrade their hardware to use Microsoft's features that they didn't ask for. And I think the people are pushing back hard on that. And certainly when they sunsetted Windows 10 and now everybody has to move to Windows 11, the question gets louder and louder. So the core issue here in terms of fairness is the fact that Microsoft is pushing AI features on most of their systems. So you can't get a Microsoft productivity product without looking in the right-hand corner and seeing Copilot. And quite frankly, not a lot of people have asked for those features. If they need to use an LLM, they can go back out and use ChatGPT or use Grok or something else, Gemini, and that'll be fine. But Microsoft is in essence pushing their AI system down upon you. And I think that's a concern for everybody out there. Certainly if it's integrated into the technology and it's taking over certain features and functions. And if you use Word for Windows, I'm sure everybody have seen how it's integrated and suggesting things and things like that. When we don't want it to do that. If we need an AI LLM, we will go out to one that we pick of our choosing and use it for whatever reason to get the answers that we want. But Microsoft is trying to push its technology at you, and that's the core concern here. So regulators are seeking concrete evidence that Microsoft's bundling could harm competition in cloud and AI sectors. Yeah, and I think that question needs to be answered because in many cases, if they're owning the ecosystem and they're pushing their products at everybody, especially if they didn't ask for them, for example, their LLM, is this going to be anti-competitive with the other products out there that are pushing their own LLMs or their own flavor of AI that typically people have the power to pick. But, Microsoft is in such a position at the operating system level and the productivity level that in many cases, enterprises, private, customers are not going to have the option to not using Microsoft, or it's just functionally, going to be out of the question, based on the fact that we have so much invested in that infrastructure currently. And that's where the fairness comes in. So in other words, if Microsoft is pushing their own flavor of technology and you didn't ask for it, their competitors can't do that because they don't own the ecosystem. Is that something that's going to be anti-competitive or not? And I think that's what the FTC is looking into now. So the FTC has consulted with a variety of industry stakeholders to gain broader insights into Microsoft's market behavior. Hey, give me a call. I'm happy to fill you in on what my feeling is, having worked with them for many years. And I think what we're going to see is an investigation, and the investigations always go just god-awful slow, where they're going to start talking and interviewing people in terms of what this is. Now, the problem with that, by the time the investigation comes to a conclusion, it may not matter anymore. In other words, you blink and lots of things happen in this industry and certainly around the AI space. So the core concern is that the investigation goes on too long, goes too slow, and it really has no impact because, at the end of a year or 2 years, however long the investigation takes, we've moved on to other things and the damage has already been done and you can't hit the reset button and undo the damage in the case of technology. What'll probably happen here is what these things always end up doing. They'll have a negotiation with Microsoft in terms of concerns about certain competitive practices that they have. Microsoft will end up paying a fine. Microsoft will end up making some minor changes to their system. It won't even make the headlines. And everybody who I think was damaged by this, in other words, not asking for this feature and function, or not asking to upgrade their hardware by force, is not necessarily going to get any kind of justice from that. And that's the way it goes. And I think we've seen this in the technology field many, many times. So unfortunately, I think this is going to end up just being a bureaucratic process that doesn't really lead to the rank and file, the customers who, are actually, felt they were impacted by this, getting any kind of benefit back from it. And that's just the way of the world, unfortunately. So why no enforcement action has yet been taken, the investigation highlights growing regulatory concerns over Microsoft's approach to pushing AI onto its users. Yeah, you think? What's going on right now, they probably got enough calls and they probably got enough concern from enterprises, not just, customers, people rank and file, your retail users who are using this stuff, who are significantly impacted by this. Now, obviously, we can have our own annoyances, as private citizens in using the Microsoft stuff. And we obviously have the opportunity to switch to other operating systems, Linux, the Apple ecosystem. And many people have done that, just basically pushing back on Microsoft's, pushing their own agendas on everybody out there. And they're just had enough and they move on to other things. But enterprises, certainly the large Global 2000 enterprises out there, are going to be impacted with many millions of dollars. In other words, if you're doing any kind of changes to the operating system and the productivity tools, and you're pushing these features and functions down upon them, they are going to be impacted in terms of the amount of revenue they have to do. If they have to upgrade their systems, that's obviously going to be many, many millions of dollars, upgraded leases, things like that. There's going to be user training. All those sorts of things are going to be a concern of the IT infrastructure, the people who run these companies. And I think that's where the real pushback is coming back. It's not, the retail users, you and I, who are not necessarily happy with what Microsoft is doing and are voicing our opinions, but the large Global 2000 customers that have, billions and billions of billions and sometimes trillions of dollars in assets that are concerned that this is damaging them. And so they went to the FTC. We'll see what they do. And you got to remember, the FTC only operates in the United States. So we can do whatever the equivalent of the FTC in the EU and whatever equivalent of the FTC and in the UK, perhaps Asia Pac, things like that. So we'll see if this catches on and catches legs. And by the way, we've been here before with Microsoft. You remember the browser stuff, where, they viewed Microsoft as holding a monopoly because they, in essence, had a browser that people were using because it was built into they felt they were forced to use because it was built into the operating system. This is kind of the same stuff here. We see these patterns in Microsoft over and over again. Now, it may be the case that they know that this kind of pushback is coming, but it's worth it to them to push this agenda forward because they're going to get impacted from having additional revenue, additional market share. So if people don't push back hard enough and people don't make a big stink about this stuff, I think they're going to continue doing this. And it's just the way companies work. You got to remember, companies aren't humans. They're not a person. They're a collection of people that are changing all the time. And they're an entity that basically looks out for themselves. And so they're going to take the best recourse, even if it hurts you or hurts a company, that's going to benefit them. And again, that's the way it is. Well, anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this, whether you think it's a good move from the FTC, we're going to get some justice out of this, or it's just another bureaucratic process that's going to be gone through and someone's going to pay a fine and something's going to get fixed or something's going to change. But, everybody who's been impacted by this aren't necessarily going to see any kind of benefits that come back to them. And unfortunately, I sound cynical, but I'm cynical because I've been in this industry for 35 years and I've seen this happen over and over again, not with just Microsoft, but other companies as well. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And you kind of have to look at it. Life's not fair. However, it'll be interesting to see what the FTC finds and what recourse comes back, if any, that are coming back to Microsoft. And if Microsoft is going to backpedal like they're doing now on some of the mistakes I think they're making with Copilot and, give people an opportunity to gain value from their system, whether that value is going to be brought back to the rank and file users, the people who are paying directly for their stuff out of pocket and who are typically going to be impacted by this. Well, anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other videos on this channel. Also, check out my InfoWorld Cloud Computing blog, my 100+ LinkedIn learning courses, and of course, my generative AI architecture course out on Go Cloud Careers. And finally, my latest books, Unlocking the Power of Cloud and An Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing. So until next week, stay very, very safe. the magical YouTube algorithm thinks this is another one of my videos that you should watch next. Take care, guys.